What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday, and today we're going to continue talking about the Legacy from Hasbro's Transformer line. We talked about it initially when it first was revealed with the few reveals that they had. Overall, I thought it pretty much looked like a huge step backward. I don't necessarily disagree with that take now, but there is more, perhaps, interesting things to talk about regarding this line, specifically the Motormaster and all that. So we're going to lean heavier into that. Just a whole lot of Minosaur Menace stuff, but I didn't want to put it in that category necessarily. I probably would have had these pictures came out, a couple days earlier, but that's my luck, right? So we're going to talk about the figures, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of combiner element of it, and then move on. I do have a Q&A coming. Stuff just keeps coming up and kind of getting in the way of it. Everybody enjoying the warm weather? Finally broke here. It's like 68 to 72. It's beautiful before the humidity comes in, but it's coming. Anyway, quick housekeeping from last week. The Entitlement for Dummies video, I really appreciate that a lot of people really got it. The amount of feedback that I got on that as it being like a great discussion and looked at it from multiple angles and dissected it a bit and all that. Like, I appreciate hearing that because we felt good about it when we wrapped. The uncut version for that is currently on Patreon, published yesterday, if you're interested. And the only thing I need to talk about regarding it was there was an overwhelming amount of comments that had nothing to do with what we were talking about in the video. And that's fine, as long as the video wasn't misunderstood also. There's a bunch of people saying why they buy KOs and like feeling like they had to explain themselves. This isn't really about that at all, or why KOs are better or anything. It wasn't about that at all. It was just about why do people expect them and then feel the way they feel regarding them. Nothing to do about why. Everybody understands why, right? It's cheaper most of the time, and on top of that, there's some are fixed and better built, some are scaled differently, and all. Everybody understands why. Everybody gets it. That wasn't, but there was a lot of comments about it. So I just, if that's how you felt that it was about why would you ever buy a KO, go back and listen with a more critical ear, perhaps. And the only other thing is, I hope you enjoyed the Nerd Rage conversation. I already have another one recorded that I'm going to try to get up, not next week, but the week after. They seem to be going over quite well. People seem to be enjoying them. Love to hear it. All right, so this second set of pictures, basically, and I mean, there's pre-orders up for a lot of this stuff, and I'll be honest with you, for the most part, the Legacy line doesn't look great to me. It looks like a step back overall, where I feel like they kind of, with whatever that stuff was, Kingdom and Earthrise, whatever all that stuff was, the Netflix stuff, they kind of really put their best foot forward and then now seem to be kind of pulling back on that a bit. And I'm sure that the economy has something to do with that and all of the kind of stuff we've been talking about recently with prices and such. But we get our second string of reveals, our second, our big string of reveals, it seems anyway. And no time like the present to go ahead, jump right in and talk about them. So we'll start with this Motormaster, because everybody's been hitting me up about it because the Stunticons, right? And I think it looks good overall. Surprisingly good. And I have to say this, that as I was looking at it, I was kind of like, man, like, they really did a lot of things right here. It's kind of almost surprising to me how good it looks. But then I just recently saw the price point. This thing is $90. Like, it does end up putting a bit of a different spin on it. So like at like $40, $50, this looks pretty good to me. At $90, not so much. At $90, it falls short of a lot of things that are kind of in that similar price point to me. That being said, price aside, objectively, I don't think it looks bad at all, with the exception perhaps of those itty-bitty little hands. What are you doing with those things, bro? Then I think there's another point of interest, which is the trailer. This thing, to me, is a case of the angles. From some angles, I think the trailer looks pretty good, specifically when the cab is sort of turned to sort of throw off the scale and proportions of the trailer in relation to the cab. However, as soon as you get a chance to really look at this thing from a side-on profile and examine it without a space diorama in the background, it begins to lose a lot of its flair, and it looks like the stubby little engine that could. Once again, 50 bucks, pretty good. 90 bucks, not so much, not so much. And then there's good news for those that care, though. There's a base mode, so there you go. You get one of those, and we'll move on to Wild Rider, who I think in alt mode looks pretty great. In fact, actually gives me a few nostalgic feels and really kind of nails the proportions of the vehicle and the overall aesthetic, which is good because it's just going to plug in to the Minosaur if that's how you intend to keep it, and it'll look the part. Bad news is it's $25. Not that that really matters all that much, but the robot mode looks horrendous. He looks like he packed up a bag full of every Hasbro mistake in the past 20 years, put that bag in a backpack, put that backpack in one of those huge luggage containers that used to be on the tops of minivans in the 80s, and then threw that on his back. Once again, robot looks pretty good. I think that the calves are a little silly, specifically in relation to the size of the thighs and stuff like that. Face sculpt looks good, but that backpack looks atrocious. It's offensive, and they've tried to pose the arm in front of it to block it in this picture as best they can. I can only imagine what it's going to be like once the arm is sitting down by his side. That is, if this is transformed properly. Speaking of things that I don't think look good, here's Blitzwing doing his best impression of SpongeBob SquarePants. In this bad boy, he's ringing in at the old price of $60. Oh God. So like $60 can get you a lot of stuff, man. Look on your favorite online retailer and look at what's available for $60, both in the realm and outside the realm of Transformers. Like, your money can go a lot further than this. Speaking of things that can go further than this, they give you a jet that comes as an accessory to, looks like a graham cracker underneath, perhaps some sort of s'more. I see a little chocolate in there, a little s'more. Gonna snore some more, you know what I mean? So I think that that pretty much looks like a train wreck. And then there's the tank mode, which is kind of probably the win of the three modes. I don't know why Blitzwing is so challenging for them to get a real serious grip on, but good grief do they struggle with this character. Then we got this thing. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know what it is. I know it's a Beast War tarantulas or tarantulas. You know, good for those that want it. I'm happy for you, and I mean that sincerely. I think that there's a kind of subjective, I guess it's subjective. I really don't want to say it is, but like, these designs are, in my opinion, are designs that only a mother could love. This doesn't look appealing to me, which makes me think that it probably looks fairly accurate. Then we have Jaxus, which I do like, and I like that he's becoming part of the kind of bread and butter of Transformers a bit more. Like, he's becoming less obscure. I do think that, and have found him to be a character that kind of feels like he fits in the mix. He seems pretty interesting, and he seems like he's kind of been there all along to me, even though he really hasn't. I think this is decent enough. There's some good sculpted detail in the calves and stuff, and, you know, it's fine. And I feel the same way, to be fair, about Knockout. Like, he's another character that I feel like kind of feels retro G1, like he's just kind of been there the whole time. We just haven't noticed. I think that the backpack on him is a little bit off-putting as well, but I think for the most part, they got a lot of things right here. And it's interesting because I think at $25, this seems like kind of the most appropriate that I've seen price point-wise. Robot mode looks good. Alt mode looks good. There's some paint apps. You know, I don't know. It seems like this is kind of on par with what they should be producing at the price point. Then there's the Elita 1. I don't know, man. I think that proportionately this thing looks kind of a mess. I don't really think they know quite what to do when they're making female characters. I feel like the anatomy always looks kind of off. It ends up looking a lot more like a child than it does like a female, oftentimes, to me. That's just my own personal opinion, but it's mine to have. And the alt mode looks stupid as well. So then I didn't know if this was new or not. I hadn't seen it before, but they got a Soundwave that looks fine. I'm not gonna take too much time on it, but it looks fine enough in robot mode. But then, like, what is this thing? I guess it's the satellite. Like, I don't know, dude. Good for him, I guess. They're just getting away with anything. They can put this thing's arm in the air and say it's a field goal post, and you guys are gonna buy it. This seems like a cop out to me. I don't need him to be a boombox. Obviously, I know a lot of this is like Cybertronian in some regard. I'm good with all that, but come on. I mean, even do the lamp post or whatever. Like, you know, but make it a little bit more interesting. I don't know. Silly to me. Just while we're on the topic of talking about new reveals, I did see these Ultimetals. Like, I don't know what happened to the Ultimetal line, the action toys. They did some really cool stuff with a Megatron and an Optimus, I believe, and they were doing an Ultra Magnus. I'm not sure if that ever actually came out, but now they're showing off this Rodimus. I think it looks great. And a hot rod, like, I think it looks fantastic. Not transforming, of course, and blah, 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 but nonetheless, pretty impressive looking piece, specifically the Rodimus. They're doing a Galvatron also, which is a little bit more stylized, and there's elements of it that I really like, and there's elements of it that don't quite do it for me, but I do like the knee pads, and I do like the crown, like how exaggerated they are. It looks wicked to me. I just feel like something's a little amiss on the actual face sculpt, specifically around the mouth, but it is interesting to see like kind of a new take. And then lastly, just because people have been hitting me up about it, the Robo Sen Prime re-releasing with the trailer that's also auto transforming, and the roller moves about and stuff, and that's like another $700. I think that's cool. You know, I think that Robo Sen Prime is amazing. It's probably the single most
Bros toy that has brought the most joy to me. I feel like I said most a lot, but in a long time. I don't really have a place for it in my collection, but if you do, and you know what I mean, you got the cheese for it, I do suggest taking a look at one because they're pretty fun and satisfying in a very specific way, so to speak. But yeah, I'm not done talking about this Menasor yet.
So what I find particularly interesting about this Menasor is that it seems to be borrowing heavily from third-party kind of approaches. And I think that Hasbro has earned that because everybody took the Combiner Wars leg transformation, right? Like we always talk about on the channel, Combiner Wars the leg. Everybody took that. A lot of people took their approaches to engineering the connector aspect of their combiners and kind of perfected it or polished it or, you know, updated it a bit. So there has been a lot that has inspired third party from Hasbro within the past, I'd say, 5 years. And now we're seeing the reverse, right? Where Hasbro is kind of being inspired by third party's approach in many ways. And this Menasor, as a result, to me, looks infinitely better than any other combiner they've ever approached ever in the history of their career. So are you ready for the news regarding this? I pre-ordered it. I pre-ordered this, the Wild Rider, the drag strip. I figured, oh well, I'll just go ahead and add it to my StundaCon collection because I'm actually genuinely curious about it. I think it looks pretty good. But the thing is they're asking the higher dollar for it, right? My problem is that the price point that they're offering doesn't seem consistent with the product that they're offering. Like the $25 spot on some of them looks right. Knockout being a perfect example. But the $100, $90 to $100 price point doesn't fit the bill for me. And then on top of that, I don't think Drag Strip or Wild Rider look good. But I am curious, because this is basically a Voyager figure. I mean, I know it's Commander Clint, but it's basically a Voyager figure being sold for $100. I want to see what Hasbro does with a $100 Voyager. And I think the engineering looks interesting, and I think that this approach that they have is kind of like, I don't know, like, I'm not smitten with it, don't get me wrong, but the approach is kind of up my alley in that regard, where it's like, it's definitely G1, specifically the Motormaster. The drag strip gets a little carried away, but like the Motormaster looks G1 inspired, but updated a bit. Some ways that I don't care for, right? The little hands. Other ways that I do care for, specifically with how it translates to Menasor, or seemingly so, right? At the very least, it's going to be better than that Combiner Wars thing, which was awful. I saw a whole lot of hubbub regarding the scale of it, right? Because I don't really know, maybe it's been listed what the scale of this is going to come in at, but if you think about it, it's probably going to be bigger than the Combiner Wars ones, right? However, it'll probably be smaller than the Devastator, and I see people getting kind of worked up about the scaling. I got news for you. I suspect, like, first of all, that's not going to be the last Devastator we ever get, but more so than that, if this is successful, I would imagine that they're planning on rolling out, so to speak, a whole bunch of combiners again, and kind of taking this approach. The question is, how are they going to do it with the ones that don't have a whole trailer attached to them? So I find it interesting, and while it may not be for me ultimately, I do think that it is saying something that Hasbro got my interest, while I'm not necessarily excited about a lot of their figures at the same time. That backpack on that Wild Rider, what a nightmare. And they tried, if you look at all the promotional pictures, they try to cover it up in every single shot. Another inspiration perhaps from third party. They're known to do that as well. So anyway, nothing crazy, something light. Hope you guys have a good Easter. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.